Thank you for joining us once again as we continue with part 2 of the Youth Session. If you were not with us in the morning, this is the Youth, the Future of Sustainable Landscapes side event. And we have had 5 incredible speakers earlier this morning talking to us about sustainable entrepreneurship and overcoming negative perceptions of employment in landscape sectors. We were taken through experiences from the Philippines, through to Kenya, through India, Indonesia. So now we are moving on to the next segment. But before we do that, I'd like to just share with you that in addition to the online audience that we have joining us, from as early as September, we also had e-discussions around this topic. And we had quite a number of people joining us. Some of the questions that were being asked include, how can we take concrete actions to improve youth access to finance? What actions can we put in place to tackle negative perceptions of youth working in agriculture or landscapes? And how do we start to reform education curriculums? What can you do to help improve the educational system in your country? And what can we do to improve access to capacity development? And how do we make sure that capacity development initiatives are relevant and meet the needs of the youth? So now we're moving on to the next session. That's going to be looking at capacity building and the power of groups. And we have 4 dynamic speakers lined up. We have Otim Joseph, Stephen Kibet, Easy Lawrence, and Amy Dushal. So let's all welcome the first speaker from the group, Otim Joseph.
Thank you, Tembi. It is very difficult to convince a person who spent the entire life in a camp to participate in environmental conservation activities. Orphans growing up during the war and relying only on food rations. Traumatized people returning home and looking at forests and trees only in terms of the product they gain from them. People suffering from dependency syndrome, where anything given to them is not enough. It is difficult, but not impossible. The war began when I was just 2 years old. I grew up in the same camp and depended on the same food ration. When I returned home, I saw how people decimate forest and woodland to gain firewood and income. And with that, I saw the potential of youth to make a change. But first, let me give you a background of what happened. Both the government forces of Uganda and the Lord Resistance Army, LRA, which was made popular during the CON 212 campaign, used a semi-scorched-earth policy during the 20 years war. The government forces cleared several kilometers on both sides of highways and security road. They also went ahead and cleared several kilometers outside all the camps. And they were actually setting fire in the woodland for 20 years, every dry season. And you can imagine the impact on biodiversity and forest regeneration. The rebels also occupied the forest, because that was their best place, and got engaged in massive lumbering and charcoal production to exchange with ammunition with Sudanese government. The communities also would escape from the camp, and others would be escorted to go to the nearby woodland to get some charcoal, to make some charcoal, to supplement the little food ratio they were given in the camp. When the gun was getting silent, and people were returning back to their homes, there was already another war, which I call climate change and global warming. That even impacted that poor returnees who went back home. Rainfall was already unpredictable and erratic. There was too much heat and wind and wild wind. Water was very scarce because the watershed had already been degraded. A forestation project we have little success because of the strong wind, which actually affected the rate of evapotranspiration. There were poor crop harvest for the returnees who went back home. And what happened when there is poor harvest? They went back into the nearby woodlands to make a living, to derive a livelihood. They were cutting trees, timber and charcoal massively. But unfortunately, they were not willing to hear anyone talk about sustainable utilization. They were not actually willing to hear anyone talk about getting involved in tree planting or even reforestation. The power of youth involvement in our landscape changed this perception and is the center of my transformative story today. In Uganda, people involved in natural resources, jobs in natural resources, are all people. The youth were not given the opportunity. But I was lucky among the many youth. I was given the opportunity. When I was given the opportunity, I realized that if I was to achieve, if I was to restore that landscape which was degraded for 20 years, then the best partners would be the youth. I needed the youth so much because I realized that, of course, with my interaction with them, I realized that they have a natural curiosity about science and environment. That was where I built from. That was where I began this story. I realized that it was very easy to train a youth. They never asked me for training allowance. They never asked me for transport fund. But the adults who were drinking in the camp for 20 years, when you call them for a training, the first thing they would ask, transport fund. In our language, we call it odong dut in our language, the Luos. They were asking for that, which money wasn't there. We had a problem. A youth will look at the problem. A youth is interested in the solution to the problem. In reaching the youth, I realized that the youth were eager to contribute their energy to change our landscape, which became degraded. There were information, very good information on conservation, reforestation, landscape. But I realized one thing. This information were not well tailored for a traumatized person who spent 20 years in war. This information was not tailored for this youth who never went back, who never went to school for 20 years. And the first thing that I did with my colleagues, the youth, my fellow youth, was to simplify this information to touch their heart. We had to use face-to-face. We went to them, to their schools. I went to the churches and talked to the church leaders. We have a problem. I went to the barracks. You have cut all these trees. 20 years. You have set fire in our homeland. You have degraded our homeland. But we need your support. You have helped us fight this war for 20 years, and you have defeated Kony. But we have the second war, which even affects you. You have got to get involved directly. You saw that is the Green Commander which is talking now, the Green General talking. They gave me a name, that Green General. I'm not a soldier, I'm a forester. The radio was talking about reconciliation and peace building. Reconciliation, peace building, peace, peace, peace. But the radio was not talking about the Second War, climate change and global warming, the weather shift, the unpredictable rainfall. I went to the owners of those radios. We have got to talk about the Second War. And they gave me the opportunity. I was given every week, Sunday, after program on radio, where I talk to the communities, where I asked my fellow youth to talk to the communities. And we developed a print called Free Talk. Free Talk, it had illustration. So that person who never went to school would follow the illustration and would see the problem at hand. There were many projects by FAO, WLP, and many others. And I told you earlier on that they were not getting the results that we wanted. I realized that they were making one mistake. You are carrying a training, a meeting, sensitization workshop of a problem which is in Warsaw. You are doing it in Netherlands. Agencies were carrying out training and workshop about a degraded landscape 200 meters away from the landscape. I realized that that wasn't good. We have got to do our training in that landscape. We have to get outside the comfort zone. We don't need to sit in a big hotel to carry out a training on a degraded landscape. And so that when you're doing that, people could feel their landscape. They can see the problem at hand. I would ask them, look around you. Get up, look around you. Look around you. Look. What happened to our landscape? Look at the roofs. The wind has blown the roofs. You are hearing the radio. Our girls are being raped every day. Because when they returned back home, they were going very long distance to get firewood. And they were being raped. Who cut these trees? It is me and you, our brothers. These rebels were our brothers. The soldiers were our brothers. And who will plant them? Who will suffer if something is not done? When should we do it? The time is now. We have the solution here with us. And you know, youth love competition. I had to develop competition between youth in schools. The competition induced innovation. It induced innovation and creativity. There was inter-school competition, inter-barracks competition, barracks competing with another barracks, inter-school competition. The competition made conservation interesting. It was fun, and it was rewarding. We had to grow more than 2 million trees in 3 years. 2 million trees, 90% indigenous. We had to begin from the available resources, local seed collection. I don't need to go and buy, to go and buy seed. We had some remaining seed stand. We began from there. We constructed more than 1,500 energy saving stops in households and in schools. So that if you have the woodlots and trees, you have got also to use the stoves, which is efficient, so that you use little firewood. Barracks are now becoming green. People are now conscious because of our talks, communication, radio. People are conscious. How much did we use in 3 years to grow 3 million trees? More than 2 million trees. How much did we use? Less than $250,000 US. And the trees are alive. But of course, these are not enough. We can do more. As youth, we have the energy. Even the longest journey begins with the first step. I did this when I spent 20 years in war. There are youth out there who can do more. They can do more. I believe that the only way to do great work is to love the job you do. And youth love their work. Having said this, do you still have doubt in youth? This is a question for you. We go ahead or we end here. This is what I always tell my people when I'm training. People who spend that 20 years in war, I ask them, we go ahead or we end here. If you're to go ahead, then we have got to do something. The youth are there. I mean, they are willing. They're not given the opportunity. I was given the opportunity, and I had to grow 2 million trees in 3 years. Why can't you give us a chance? Thank you so much.
Hello. Hello. I'm Stephen Kibet, and I'm glad to be here. My story, as you can see, is Kenya's youth mapping technology to combat soil erosion. You can give me the first slide. If you look at that landscape, it's green, very fertile, and it's flat. Now, let's go to the second slide. What do you see there? Deep gullies, soil which has been eroded, and productivity has been reduced. That is the problem we have in Kerio Valley and Baringo in Rift Valley province. So having grown, I saw the effect of soil erosion in the area since when I was young. And my story dates back to late 80s and 18s. And that is the time when my grandfather was born. When I grew up, I asked him, "Grandfather, what happened? Was the land this way?" And the answer I got was that my grandchild, it was not this way. It was like the first slide we saw. Then the second question is, how did it happen? The answer he gave me was that as time continued, people cut trees to create lands, farming lands, and also to cut trees to pan charcoal for sale. It was a great problem to me. I got the opportunity to join university. And remember, I have a problem in my heart that I want to look for a solution. Fortunately, I was among the very few in Kenya who happened to have done geography. And that is where I came across geographical information systems and remote sensing, which is a technical course that deals with mapping. With a lot of enthusiasm, I started the course. And in my third year of study, I had a very good proposal of going and to do mapping of soil erosion in Kerio Valley. There are projects that I used was very simple. GIS and remote sensing has the capability whereby you can do land use, land cover analysis, and to know how the land has changed over time. Also with GIS, you can use models to map soil erosion, such as revise the universal soil loss equation. And from there, you can be able to know actually where is erosion taking place, which is actually a very great question that we ask ourselves. After doing my research, the results that I got were interesting because I could relate actually what I had mapped with what was actually happening in the ground. I went back and shared the maps that I had generated from my research with some friends in the village, and they were really inspired to see actually that what I had generated from my research, they could relate it to what was actually happening in the ground. And one of them asked me a simple question, and he said, "Steve, what can you train us to do this mapping?" But the answer was, it's really difficult because geographic information systems, we use very expensive software. And the only place I could get the software is in the university. But that didn't kill our dream. We had the passion to continue with our mapping. I shared this with my professors in the university, colleagues, and professionals in the mapping field. And they told me that there are many available mapping softwares that are freely available, which you call it open source. I studied several of them, and I narrowed to one, which is called MapWindow. MapWindow is an open source software. You can download it and install it in your computer. It's very simple. And after learning all the software, I went back and I told them, my friends, yes, it's possible that I can train you so that we can map our landscape and know where erosion is taking place. But now the second challenge came in. How do we do it? We needed to bring on board the youth. We realized there were existing youth groups and religious youth groups, so we thought it's good to work with them. So we called a meeting, and they came. So far, we have 10 groups. Then from there, we said, yes, because we can't train all the members at once, let us have 6, and we ensure it's gender sensitive. So we will my responsibility is to take them through the software, and then with most of our data, we download them from open source, and then some of the data we get from the local agencies. It has created a lot of interest in the youth, because after training the 6, they will go and train the other members. So my work will be supervisory role, where I go around and look at how they are doing the mapping. So far, we are in the process of training the 6, and we hope by March next year, we will be able to train all the groups. Then after that, we will subdivide the landscape using GIS, and then they will be able to map specific land areas, and then we would compare and then come with measures that can be adopted. The approach has become of great interest, but I can say there's been challenges on our way. But one of the issue that we face as the youth is that we don't have sufficient computers, but in the process, we've been able to use the little resources that we have. I have a computer. One of my friends has one. So we collect these computers and train them. So actually, resources is not an issue. We can use the little that we have. Another thing that we usually have is the time factor. Youths are very dynamic. But with the interesting thing that are coming out of our mapping is that now, whenever we call a meeting, there is a lot of great interest that is coming out of it. And they are coming on board, and we do the training. So those are some of the things that we've been able to do. And in carrying out all this mapping, we've been able to capacity build the youth in using technology. And we are bringing this technology to the local level. I may have started in the university. I may have done my research in the university. But now I'm taking this little knowledge back to the village and training them how to use mapping technologies. Apart from this, the IT skills they are gaining, they will be able even to go ahead and do other activities related to IT. And from there, they will be able to generate employment opportunities. So actually, it is possible to bring knowledge from class to the village level. That I assure you. The other thing that we've learned actually from our mapping is that this is not the first mapping we are doing. There's some researches that has been published, but they are lying in the shelves. But my responsibility was to bring this thing to the ground. So most of the researchers, we are now preaching the CAP in the research, whereby we do the research, and then we do the research with the youth. And by doing that, we are making them to be actively engaged. The other thing that we've been able to do is we are giving youth a voice. Interestingly, the maps that we are generating, we take them and even show the local administration and say, yes, you are saying the land is not being degraded. Look at what happened in 1986. That is from the image that we have analyzed. Compare it with what is happening in 2012. Don't you see the changes? From there now, we get a voice as a youth to air our issues concerning environmental conservation. As I conclude, I want to bring this point. It is that little amount of soil lost every year that causes our land to be degraded. And it's my responsibility and your responsibility as the youth to contribute towards this. We are using mapping as a way of contributing towards conserving the soil. You have a skill. You have a skill. Use that to promote landscape and agriculture. Thank you so much.
Hi, good morning. I'm Izzy Lawrence, and I'm a consultant for Connect for Climate. And I'm here to tell you a story about a group of rappers called TS1. So, young people have the power to change the world, but they don't always feel that that's possible. This could be for various different reasons. It might be because they don't have an internet connection, so they don't feel that they've got a voice to go and tell the world their opinion. It might be because it's only them and they just feel like one voice alone isn't really going to do anything. Or it might be that they just feel that their local situation just isn't global enough and doesn't affect enough people. Whatever it is, these self-defeating thoughts among young people are a big obstacle for our task at Connect for Climate. And that task is to build a more expansive and activist global movement about climate change. So we're all here today because we're looking for action-orientated strategies to shape the climate and development agenda for forest and agriculture. So one thing that we've got to do is throw out the mentality that makes young people think that they cannot contribute to a movement about climate change. So Connect for Climate has been working for 2 years to engage the global community in climate change conversations. And its main target, first and foremost, is youth. One way that C4C carries out its mission to inspire young people is by holding international competitions, where young people from around the world are invited to tell their personal climate change stories through photos and videos. And this sounds like quite a simple concept, but actually you'd be so surprised the entries that we've had for these competitions. They've come from different countries all around the world, and some of them have been sort of videos about climate change that have actually been really funny. Some of them have been taking a completely different view that you wouldn't have thought of, and all of them have been really imaginative and engaging. I'm going to put some on my blog post later on, so you can check some of those out. So, I want to tell you a personal story about how I was inspired by this rap group called TS1 at an event that was run by C4C. The event was called Right Here, Right Now, and was held last March at the World Bank headquarters in Washington, DC. I was invited to be part of the awards, and the awards were called Voices for Climate. And my role was basically to stand up on the stage and announce all the winners that were taking part in this competition and introduce the different speakers. So I'm standing on stage at the World Bank, having never been to Washington, having never been to the World Bank, in front of 2,000 people, introducing people that have won Nobel Peace Prizes, introducing the president of the World Bank, and meeting all the winners. So naturally, I'm feeling really nervous. And I'm on stage, and as the evening progresses, basically my nerves are completely dissipated by meeting this incredible group of young people. And I want to tell you about their story because it really is one of youth empowerment. And it's also of entrepreneurship in the face of adversity and of young people overcoming obstacles. So TS1 are originally from a place called Kibera, and that's one of Nairobi's biggest slums. It once used to be a bucolic wooded hillside outside of Nairobi, and today it's overcrowded, as you can see. And in fact, it's one of the most densely populated places on our planet. And so, as you can see from this, there's not many green spaces. It maybe seems like a bit of an unlikely place for people to be concerned about the environment. They don't have much access to green space, but at the same time, it doesn't look that promising. But actually, they are. So many rappers might choose to rap about their cars, their money, their girlfriends, whatever. But TS1 decided to rap about their local world, their agriculture, their forestry, and their lack of it. Their first video was about how to save energy and was a rap called Me and My Bike. And it won the first prize in a Connect for Climate competition. I'm going to put the video on the blog later so that you can see it. So taking agriculture, economics, and forestry in isolation, I believe, is a completely pointless exercise. In order to reach sustainable development, we need to do what TS1 have done and look at a combined approach. And that's why we're all here, right? Maybe not to rap, although I don't want to stop anyone, but I think we're all here to look at some kind of combined approach. So, since TS1 made this video, they've also produced several other rap songs about the environment and about climate change. So one was called Biogas, about choosing biogas. Another's called Trash is Cash, and it's about water shortages and local erosion. And after winning the Connect for Climate competition, and after sort of being on this stage, they started to work together even more. Bear in mind, this is sort of 4 people from one of the poorest areas in the world. And good things really started to happen. One of the Connect for Climate partners runs a project called Artist Project Earth. And that basically takes different artists and they make, he does music projects with them, a brilliant guy called Kenny. And he somehow found the rights to an Eminem track called Not Afraid. And so TS1 got hold of this track and they changed all of the lyrics in the main verse so that it could be relevant to them, but they kept the same chorus. And a bit like we were talking before with TV about making things kind of quite upfront and quite sexy, maybe not the words that you put together with agriculture, but maybe they will be, you know, next year. But really what they did is they made this amazing track that really spoke to young people. And I was going to play it for you, but, you know, is it going to work? Oh my God, it's going to work. So I will. I'll play it for you at the end. Okay. Before it was like a computer says no situation. But, yeah, so I'm going to be able to play that for you. And you can see what I mean. You can see how it really would engage young people. And from there, so they've made this video, they've got the rights to this really famous artist's song, and they're just carrying on. They're still making their songs, they're still engaging their friends, they're still living in their slum. And then for the first time, they take a flight out of the country, and they go to Washington, and they come perform. And the performance is absolutely incredible. And they just blow everyone away. And it was when I was sort of standing there nervously, having to sort of introduce all these different people and meet all these competition winners and stuff on stage at the World Bank and sort of, you know, worrying about the things you might worry about if you're doing that. And I met TS1 backstage, and I sort of wanted to check that they were okay. So I was like, are you all right? Are you sort of nervous? Are you know, how are you feeling? And they've just taken their first flight. They arrived really late. They had a real problem getting into the country. And one of them just turned around to me and just said, of course we're okay. We've now got everyone listening to us, and this is our voice, so we're not afraid. And then they just went forth. And that completely just dispelled anything that I felt, but it also really inspired me. And their performance was amazing. So I'm going to end by playing their track, if we can get it working. Is that going to work? Yeah, let's play it now. Thanks very much.
get a grip, what are we fighting for? Pick your tools, find a place, plant a tree. Mother Earth is on her knees, so please stand up and say with me. I'm not afraid to take a stand, take a stand. Everybody, everybody, come take my hand, come take my hand. Walk this walk together through the storm, whatever weather, cold or warm. Just let me know that you're not alone. Mama, if you feel like you can do the same. Love for us to win-win, the solution might lie as close as a dustbin. So reduce a couple footprints, to give your future seed a head start. There's a hint for survival, recycle your glass, metal and paper. That means our salvation lies in the sun that shines every day, and the wind that blows in your face, and the heat from the ground that lies beneath your feet. That's why leave your car, take a hike to work, and ride a bike, and who knows, maybe in time it's something we'll start to like.
It's impossible to go after that. I mean, my name is Amy Duchel, and I'm going to, take us, back to this research idea that we were talking about a little bit earlier today. I'm from CIFOR. I'm a scientist at CIFOR. I am coordinating a part of our global comparative study on REDD in 6 countries: Brazil, Peru, Cameroon, Tanzania, Vietnam, Indonesia, and working with lots and lots of young people on this. And I think as we heard from the earlier conversation, climate change needs a new kind of scientist. It can't be a scientist who's working for 30 years in their technical aspect and then discovers that their science actually has a potential policy impact. We need scientists who can think about biophysical science, who can think about social science, who can think about integrating those things, who can work across scales. I'm a forester. I need to understand agriculture. I need to understand the political economy of REDD, which is not something that I was trained to do. I need to be able to actually engage civil society in my research. I need to make it interesting. I need to understand how my science links to the policy environment. And, most of our academic training doesn't prepare us for that. We do not have the skills to take on this absolutely huge challenge that we actually have to take on as researchers. And I think this is why the young researcher is the key to this, because the sooner that young scientists can get those kinds of skills and think in those kinds of integrated ways, actually, that's how we change what we currently see as these limitations. Someone's saying scientists are not good communicators. Does it really have to be that way? I mean, can we not get skills earlier on that scientists don't have to be bad communicators? They can actually communicate their results and work with teams to help do this. So in CIFOR's global comparative study on REDD, I'm working in the part mostly in Peru and Bolivia. We collected data in 170 villages with over 4,000 families in the 6 countries where we're working. And in Latin America alone, between 2010 and 2011, we hired 80 young researchers for 8 sites in the Amazon. And those were undergraduate students, those were graduate students, both masters and PhDs from Brazil and Peru. And they not only collected all of the data on livelihoods and land use so that we can follow this over time and understand the impacts of climate change mitigation activities, but then 1 year after they collected that data, we went back to all of the places where we had collected the first phase data, and we shared the results with the communities and with our partners and with the people who were actually implementing the climate change mitigation activities. And this is a simple step, actually. I mean, many researchers go back to where they collected the data and they share the results. And here are some photos of doing that through community meetings, through graphs, through games, through reports, actually somebody created a theatrical production of what the results looked like, and engaged community members in the actual theater production as actors. You know, and what blew me away is that I was sort of imagining a kind of conventional approach to this. Okay, we have our research results, we go to the communities, we present them, and actually these young students totally innovated on that. I mean, the theater production, this was, you know, this came out of nowhere, the art, the games, and it just reinforced to me that this is it. I mean, this is how science can become interesting, actually. And the thing, too, is that, you know, the thing that actually bothers me, and it's bothered me for years, and it still bothers me, is when you go to these communities and they've had tons of research groups come in, and you know that, and they say to you, you guys are the first group that's come back with the information. You know, I mean, that's just, it's not okay. And it's, it just shows the importance of this as sort of our first responsibility, actually. And this is just really basic information sharing. This is not a big deal. It takes some budget, it takes a bit of funds, it takes some time, it takes some creativity, but this is, I think, our basic. This is what we have to do, and then we can build up from there. And maybe we could see the next slide, Michelle. This is something that actually I developed with a bunch of other forestry graduate students when I was finishing my PhD, and it was a group of us who were actually thinking about this then, and thinking of really how within our sort of confined academic environment as researchers we could share knowledge in different ways. And what I showed, you know, just this at the basis of the pyramid is sort of the easiest things that you can do. So in our diagram, I mean, we were graduate students at the time, so we were this sort of black circle, the graduate student researcher, but this can be any researcher, young, old, any. And then the local stakeholders were in the white circles, and that was, you know, this can be communities, this can be practitioners, this can be policymakers. I mean, it's really where you're working, you can think of this. And so what I showed with you know, going back to communities and returning results, that's simple information sharing. And that's the easiest thing to do. And that's sometimes it's one way, actually. Sometimes it's presentations, but there's always the learning that comes back. When you show some of the graphs that came out from that particular site, and they say, well, that doesn't make sense, or why would it be that way? And then you start questioning the analyses, and it becomes actually a very two-way process. And then skill building, and Stephen gave the perfect example of skill building. I mean, thank you for that mapping example, because you as a student saw this demand, you went back to your university, you found how you could actually contribute, and I think, you know, that's taking this a step farther. And that's actually bringing, you know, responding to a demand as a researcher. And then the highest level, which is actually the hardest for students, I'd say, and young researchers to get involved in, but really the place where the most innovation is happening is this knowledge generation together. And so that's when the researcher is actually formulating the research questions with either the communities or the practitioners or the policymakers, together creating the research questions, together implementing the research, together analyzing the results, and together then disseminating the results. I mean, that's really, and I'm sure you all actually know of examples like this. And I know of a master's student in Brazil who had no funds actually for her work, and had 1 month in a community, and recognized a need in the Brazilian Amazon, recognized a need that they were asking for to monitor fruit production over time of economically important tree species that had been changing because of climate change. And actually then went to an NGO, a nearby NGO, got funding for this work, and then engaged this community in this 4-year monitoring of fruit trees that really came from nothing and then became, you know, her master's and then later PhD work. So this is really possible at any level. And I think what I've seen at least is that young researchers are the ones who can break out of the boxes that we define. I mean, how much I learned from the younger students on our teams, and keep learning and keep changing how we think about this. So if you're in the audience and you're faculty and or part of academic programs, encourage your students to do this kind of knowledge exchange in their research. Validate it, plug them into your networks, if you can, actually create skills courses for it. I was part of a, I happened in my PhD program, I happened to take a course on conflict and collaboration management. And this is something that I go back to all the time, actually, in my work that as a forester I would have never taken, actually. And so if there's even opportunities for facilitation skills courses or conflict management courses or kinds of courses that can help people in knowledge exchange, help with that. If you're practitioners, welcome students and young researchers into your work. Be willing to develop research with them. Be willing to learn from students and help them be better professionals by working with you. If you're donors, support the research where you see this clearly articulated, or maybe not this, but something that's actually showing real and genuine knowledge exchange. And if you're students and young researchers, I think recognize the very unique moment that you're in right now in your career, because while there's a diversity of situations and people are under very different constraints and things like that, I guess generally you're less encumbered by a lot of the other things that come later. And you're not, I want to be careful about saying this, but some of the conventional academic metrics are less placed on you at that stage of your career. So maybe you're more open to be able to really engage in this and actually innovate it and teach all of us about how to do this better. So thank you very much. And I guess the last thing is, while you're here, for the people who are here, take advantage of talking with the practitioners, with the policymakers, if you're students, make those connections now. I mean, come work with us at CIFOR, come work with the other organizations. I mean, this is a very nice opportunity to get out of your academic setting and make those kinds of connections that will help you be better professionals. So thank you.
Thank you, Amy. I'd like to invite the speakers to come up front for the panel discussion, which is going to be a quick one. As they come up front, I want to test if this audience was inspired by TS1. So I'm going to throw a rap for you and see if you respond to me. I'm trying to read this audience to see if it will respond, so don't embarrass me. So when I say GLF, you say youth. GLF. GLF. Nah, you're warm. Okay, so thank you so much to our speakers once again. We are going to just dive straight into the questions. Peter, if you can start us off with the question from the online audience.
Well, there's a question and there's a request definitely popping up on what Izzy said was hooking on the platforms where youth can bring their stories. So there was a question whether we should actually make an inventory while we're all here and we're all interested, we're all agitated and happy and rapping, whether we should make an inventory of where the youth can publish their stories and where the youth can publish the project that they're working on. It might not be a rap song, but it might be a science project like Amy is working on. So in the conversation it was, while we're here, you tweet, if you have a platform and you're willing to publish youth stories, you tweet with the Twitter tag GLF COP19, and you tweet the address where we can publish, or you send it to info@ypart.net, info@ypard.net. Send the platforms where the youth can publish the stories. This was one request, and then there was a question which is directed towards Izzy. Now, what happened with those young people living in the slums? Are they still living in the slums? There was a remark, advocacy is good, but action is even better.
Hello. Yeah, it's a really good question. Thanks for that question. Yeah, absolutely. Action is what it's obviously all about. There's no point just telling a little story. So, yeah, TS1 are still in Kibera. They're still making music. And and they're still working on projects, and I'm actually due to go over there, not sort of in an official sort of capacity, but just because I'm spending some time in Kenya, and I want to go and see not only what they're doing, but also other people that they've inspired within Kibera and within their sort of local area. But I also think that even though it's, you know, one of the sort of poorest places in the world and one of the largest slums and one of the most overcrowded places, it's also one of the most entrepreneurial places and one of the most can-do places. And so I'm really intrigued to go there and see. But essentially, it's all about perseverance. So they didn't do just sort of one song, and they didn't do one song and then get loads of really great feedback. They literally just carried on making music because they felt that that was their way. And I think it really helped that they were a group together, so they weren't doing it on their own. They were very much engaging people that were around them, and through that, they basically engaged the rest of the world. I mean, it got to the stage where they were literally like MTV sort of saw them and they, you know, put them on in Times Square, and there was just this, you know, TS1 sort of video rolling in Times Square for free because they'd really sort of engaged and inspired, you know, the people at MTV. I mean, I think it's really just about putting it out there and doing it rather than thinking, what, you know, sort of feeling like there's lots of barriers to doing something, actually just getting on and doing it and organising those groups so that you're able to do it. And yeah, I want to go out and find some other groups like TS1 out in Kibera.
Thank you, Izzy. We'll take questions from the floor. I'll take the first 4 questions. Okay, I see a question up there. Another one there. Okay, the mic, Michelle. Let's start with the lady here, just behind you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joanna from CIFOR and also represented from IFSA, International Forestry Student Association. I had one question for Stephen Kibe. And yeah, I'm just thinking of, and Ami sort of alluded to that, how is your research being translated into practice? I mean, there's a lot of research out there, but I mean, what's the use of having it if it's not being used? And I'm just wondering how, if your work is being used by the government to sort of address the causes of soil erosion and what is being done. Yeah.
Thanks. We'll take the one up there.
Yeah, I'm Ebile Pride from Hohenheim University. First of all, I will try to give an overview of the situation, which is the reality. We have 3 kinds of government. A government that is going to work for the people.
Sorry, can you just get to the question, because we don't have enough time for this discussion session. So just get to the question so that they can respond to your question.
It's really important, Madam Moderator.
Okay.
A government that will want to stay in power and a government that is being influenced by lobby groups. We are talking about capacity building. Actually, how do you build capacity within the youth in this framework? That's my question, because we heard a lot, but how can you really build capacity within the youth in these 3 different frameworks? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, the panelists will answer the questions. Amy, I think maybe you can also answer the question on research, putting research into use that was asked by the lady there.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think this is the big question, actually, because how do you measure research impact? And actually, this is happening in the CGIAR now, we have to, as researchers, really show that impact and map that impact. And there are good impact stories out there. I mean, I think one from our work in Brazil that's happening, you know, as we speak, is that the government of